Hey folks, it's Nate. It's time I got back to the drawing board, and tonight I'm back with the book club after taking a week off to review some comics. In the broad overview kind of a sense, we're back to taking a detailed look at Naoki Urasawa's Monster, which I consider to be one of the greatest manga ever created. And we are really cooking now. As I said, these middle chapters of Volume 1, or at least Volume 1 of the Omnibus, I suppose this may not be Volume 1 in some other releases, but these middle chapters of Volume 1 of the Omnibus really present us with the core formula, the core thematic loop of Monster, which is Johann is shown to be influencing a character. Tenma becomes involved. That influence plays out as Tenma learns more about Johann, and finally there's some kind of climactic confrontation. Not always with Johann himself, sometimes it's actually with Inspector Lunge, who is my favorite character in this manga. But in this case, Lunge is not involved in this confrontation, as we will see. And what's really interesting about this is really a monster manga, even though the villain is Johann, a completely human person. And he is treated much like the monster in a monster movie, much like Jaws is in Steven Spielberg's classic movie. We see him very little. We spend more time following people around places he's been and witnessing the carnage he's wreaked. And that is really, it builds him up. Just like a monstrous monster, this human monster is built up as a truly horrifying thing. And in this chapter, we really get the payoff for this buildup that Johann has been getting in the last 3 or 4 chapters. So we start off, Dr. Tenma has brought Anna back to the Fortner house, the place where she has been raised under the name of Nina. And they are concerned because not only are the Fortners there, Dr. Tenma's friend, Herr Mauer, is also there. And they tried to call the police in the last chapter, but the lines were cut. And that doesn't really bode well. And indeed, upon entering the house, we find everyone dead. And that, in turn, leads to Nina having a revelation. Of course, we are given a few pages to appreciate the carnage. And really, this is another thing Urosawa does well. He really lets this scene build up. There's actually 2 whole pages here of the revelation of the carnage in the house, followed by another 2 pages of really just the character's shocked response to this. Of course, we see Dr. Tenma behaving as you would expect a doctor to, and I mean, this gives you a chance to absorb the grief that Anna is feeling, and also the sense of failure that Dr. Tenma has in not having been able to stop Johann. And of course, he is also not in the same way that Anna is, but he's still grieved by the deaths of these 2 people, who's only known a little while, but who are very friendly to him. And of course, they had a lot of very sympathetic qualities. They're concerned about their their daughter, excuse me. And it's a bit of a gut punch to see them dead like this. And the shock of this, in turn, brings Anna to a revelation. And that revelation is she gets her memories back. And she realizes that the person who shot Johann in the head and led to Dr. Tenma operating on him 10 years ago was Anna herself. And this is, Anna has struggled with a memory block since the age of 10, shortly after she tried to kill her brother. And this revelation signals that her memories are coming back and kind of breaks them out of the trance. But it's also pretty disturbing because here is this girl who's been so far bright, cheerful, intelligent, optimistic, helpful to all those around her, and we now learn that she tried to murder her brother. Now, given what we know about Johann, it's kind of hard to blame her for that. But this is still a very uncomfortable revelation. And this is really the climax of the chapter. Now, a bunch of things happen after this. Like, there are events, but this is the most important beat. After this, basically, the police come, and they take Tenma and Anna away to take them to the police station and ask them some questions because, surprise, you found these two people with three corpses around them in a house. Of course, you're going to take them in and ask them some questions. And Dr. Tenma notices that there is blood on the coat of one of the detectives. And he comes to the realization that these must be people working with Johann, and he and Anna make a quick escape. There is something, I think, lost in translation. He introduces himself as a doctor, and then later on claims that he didn't tell the detectives he was a doctor, and this is one of the things that's supposed to have tipped him off that something was out of order. Johann places a lot of importance on Tenma being a doctor. I think this is a failure of translation. I believe Tenma may have used some notoriously imprecise Japanese phraseology when introducing himself, and then the detectives in turn spoke very specifically of him as a doctor when they were talking with him. I can't be sure. I don't actually read Japanese, and my spoken Japanese is extremely limited. Basically, just phrases I've picked up watching, your anime here and there in the original Nihonwa. So I'm not an expert. I couldn't confirm this, but I do know that one of the quirks of Japanese is it tends to be incredibly imprecise in some of its common phraseology, which can be frustrating to translators, but allows for these kinds of fake outs in the original Japanese. And I think there was a failure of translation in this chapter. But it's enough for Tenma to realize he's been had, and so he takes Anna, who is still a bit shell-shocked, and at the end of the chapter he jumps off of a bridge into the river because he knows they are taking him back to Johann. After all, Johann is such a monster that his sister tried to kill him. And this is one of the horrifying things about a monster like Johann. He is so poisonous, he warps everything around him in response. Either he has devoted, almost slavish, hypnotized followers, like these detectives are, or he can drive people who should love and care about him a great deal to homicidal violence. And this is just another one of those signs that there's something so horribly wrong with this person that normal people, everyday people, very wholesome, well-intentioned people like Anna can completely snap after being around him for a long period of time. And that is really quite scary. And it's one of those things that, showing these kinds of weird, disturbing reactions to a character we barely know, that allows Urosawa to build in our minds the impression that he truly is a monster. I'll see you in chapter 14.